All right, let's dive straight into this one because this chilling case study from the Himalayas is an absolute wild ride. In today's explainer, we're unpacking a terrifying firsthand account from a survivor named Sahil. We're going to break down step by step how a completely normal vacation among a group of friends basically unraveled into a full-blown fight for survival against something entirely unexplainable. We'll be looking at the anatomy of this haunting, really digging into the geography, the psychological elements, and the exact timeline of what went down at the infamous Manali 28 km milestone.
Shanda hai tu, mera suraj hai tu. In English, that translates to, you are my moon, you are my sun. It's this super sweet, innocent childhood lullaby. A song that's supposed to make you feel safe and loved. But for Sahil, this exact innocent tune morphed into an absolute living nightmare. And to really grasp how a symbol of comfort became this weapon of terror, we first have to look at the mental state of the guys in the car.
So that brings us to section 1, the catalyst of grief. What's truly fascinating about this case is the setup. These weren't a bunch of thrill-seeking kids looking for ghosts. Not at all. This was actually a rescue mission of the heart. The group was made up of 4 tight-knit friends: Sahil, Chirag, Arun, and our focal point for today, Samai. And here is the absolutely crucial detail. Samai was incredibly vulnerable. Just a few months before this trip, his younger brother was tragically killed in a school trip car accident. Ever since then, Samai, who used to be this fun, life-of-the-party kind of guy, had just completely shut down into his grief. His friends actually organized this whole Manali getaway specifically to pull him out of that dark place. But treating his mourning as just some sad backstory completely misses the point. As we're going to see, his grief wasn't just context. It was the exact vulnerability that a dark entity was waiting to exploit. All right, moving on to section 2, Curse of Rotang Pass. Okay, picture this. It's day 3 of their trip. The guys are gearing up to visit this incredibly popular scenic spot when a local hotel receptionist drops a pretty heavy warning on them. The destination is Rotang Pass. And this really highlights that classic disconnect between tourists and locals, doesn't it? Tourists look at it and see breathtaking mountains. But the locals, well, they know the name Rotang literally translates to Valley of Death or Pile of Corpses. The receptionist gives them one very strict, non-negotiable rule. You have to be back indoors before 6 p.m. And the local lore behind this rule is just wild. The locals believe that if you're out in Rotang Pass after dark, you run the risk of crossing paths with a Mayavi Saya, which is this deceptive, illusionary spirit. Now, obviously, the official records tell a completely different story. The authorities always write off the historical deaths up there as extreme cold, exposure, or just tragic mountain accidents. But the locals, they absolutely insist that those natural explanations are just a convenient cover for whatever entity is actually out there hunting in the dark. Which leads us right into section 3, the 28-kilometer loop. So, like a lot of tourists do, the guys just kind of brush this local lore off as a scary story meant to spook visitors. They lose track of time, stay way too late, and start their drive down the mountain. And this is where things take a terrifying turn, into a blinding, dangerous fog. Just look at this timeline for a second. It really shows how the dread escalates. They head out around 5 p.m. By 9:15 p.m., the environment just fully turns on them. They are completely swallowed up by this thick fog, barely crawling along at 30 kilometers per hour, practically blind on these twisting mountain drop-offs. Then, by 11 p.m., they realize something much, much worse. They aren't just lost. They're physically trapped in a loop. And the details from this specific part of the drive are arguably the most mind-bending of the whole explainer. Driving through the soup, they pass a milestone that reads Manali 28 km. Right next to it, Sahil clearly sees a man in a white dhoti standing there. Fast forward 20 minutes, and they pass that exact same milestone again. But this time, when Sahil points out the man in the white dhoti, Chirag says, "No way, that's a little girl playing with a toy." And Arun, who's driving, says he sees a black horse just staring right at them. It's a textbook, yet incredibly rare, shared hallucination. But it's fractured. The entity is literally hacking their individual perceptions all at the exact same time. But here's the catch. While Sahil, Chirag, and Arun are absolutely freaking out, Samai's reaction is completely different. He slips into this deep, trance-like state and just quietly mutters, "Someone needs our help. If someone asks for help, we should stop." You see, the illusions weren't meant to scare Samai at all. The entity was actively zeroing in on his specific grief, totally weaponizing his lingering guilt and his instinct to protect a younger brother. Then, the illusion just sort of snaps into a single, unified threat. They pass the 28 km milestone for a third time, but no one is standing there. Instead, Arun suddenly realizes there is a figure moving right alongside their car in the pitch black. It's a 15-year-old boy. He's covered in dirt, and his face is just completely battered with severe injuries. And this is where all physics and logic completely go out the window. Remember, they're driving at 40 kilometers per hour. So the absolutely terrifying takeaway here is that this battered kid wasn't sprinting to keep up with them. He was just casually walking alongside the car at highway speeds. As you've guessed, absolute pandemonium breaks out inside the car. Samai, genuinely believing this injured kid needs a rescue, starts rolling down his window. Arun is frantically mashing the central lock button, but the controls just inexplicably die. The guys start screaming Samai's name, which finally snaps him out of his trance. The boy falls behind the car, but as they floor it to get away, Sahil glances in the rearview mirror. He sees the boy just standing in the middle of the road, waving. And then he looks at Samai. Samai is staring into the mirror, smiling and waving right back. That brings us to Section 4, the midnight possession. Completely rattled, they somehow manage to break the loop and pull up to the safety of their hotel right around 2 a.m. They are totally exhausted and figure, we'll deal with this in the morning, and go straight to bed. But, unfortunately, locking the hotel door didn't do a thing. The nightmare actually hitched a ride inside with them. Around 3:30 a.m., Sahil is jolted awake by a voice singing. It's the lullaby. Chanda hai tu. He looks over and Samay is sitting bolt upright, staring dead into the mirror, singing that song to his own horrific reflection. His eyes are completely blood red. He has these deep, bruising marks all around his neck, literally like invisible hands are strangling him, and plastered across his face is this deeply unsettling, innocent, childlike smile. The friends try to grab him, but they are literally frozen in terror. Samay slowly turns to face them, but when he speaks, it's not his voice. Coming out of his mouth is the sweet, high-pitched voice of a young child, asking, "If I knock on your window at night, will you open it to help?" And right after delivering those chilling final words, Samay just crumples to the floor, completely unresponsive. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the morning exorcism. Morning finally hits, and the friends know they are way, way out of their depth. Remembering that warning from the receptionist, they drag an unconscious Samai straight to a local pundit, a spiritual priest who actually knows how to handle the dark lore of the past. Now the pundit looks at Samai and delivers this immediate, terrifying diagnosis without the friends even having to explain the backstory. He tells them exactly what went down. That dark entity out on Rotang Pass had flawlessly exploited Samai's heartbreak. It mimicked the soul and the suffering of his recently deceased little brother, basically using Samai's own empathy and guilt as a backdoor to bypass his defenses and take over his body. The pundit wastes no time. He immediately starts up this ancient 3-step morning ritual to forcibly evict the spirit. Step 1 is Nazar Utarna, which is an energetic clearing of the evil eye. Then he moves to Step 2, Jad Ponk, a spiritual sweeping technique designed to aggressively unsettle the entity. And finally, Step 3, the puja, an intense, heavy prayer ritual meant to physically force the entity out of its host. The ritual builds and builds until it reaches this incredibly visceral, terrifying climax. The sheer force of the prayers causes a violent purge, and Samai violently vomits this thick, pitch-black liquid all over the floor. And with the physical expulsion of that liquid, the entity is finally banished. Samai snaps back to normal, having absolutely no memory of the horror he'd just become. But his friend Sahil, who shared this whole account, yeah, he's permanently scarred, still having nightmares about that simple little lullaby. So what does this all mean for us? Well, this explainer perfectly highlights how your psychological vulnerabilities can be just as dangerous as physical ones when you're dealing with the unknown. The biggest takeaway here is that the entity didn't actually force its way in. It simply asked for help. So, I've got to ask you, if you were driving down an empty, pitch-black road and you heard a sudden knock on your window tonight, would you open it to help?